Hello, everybody, and welcome to our guest speaker interview series. Today, I have a very special guest with us, Dhruva Bhat, and he's had a very interesting journey. To know more about this journey, you can visit our blog on our website at www.niraliadvisory.com. And welcome so much, Dhruv, and we're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to speak to all of you.
So, our first guest speaker is Dhruva Bhat. And it is such an incredible honor to have you here with us today. Dhruva, you have such an incredible journey, but I'm not going to say much about it because I want you to introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, your background, your driving values, and all the wonderful things that make you who you are today.
Thank you so much, Nirali. So a little bit about me. My name is Dhruva, as you guys know. I grew up in Chennai, though I'm originally from Mangalore and Kasaragod, which is where my family is from. I went to school here in Chennai. I studied commerce in the 11th and 12th. I then went to Harvard, where I did my undergrad degree in economics. I then went to Oxford, where I did a master's in international development, and I'm currently a PhD student in the same department. Along the way, I've done a bunch of things that I'm excited to talk to you all about. And currently, the big thing on my plate that I'm working on is that I'm one of the directors of the Lumiere Research Scholar Program, a research program for high school and young researchers from around the world, but particularly from India. In terms of the values that drive me, I think the two biggest things have been curiosity and connection. In terms of curiosity, it's always being excited about learning about things, whether that's learning about the world, learning about people, learning about why people say the things they do and what they do. And connection in that it is really engaging with folks and trying to be of use to them and try to help them out wherever possible, whether that's personally, professionally, emotionally. And so I think those are the two things that have really pushed me in terms of the things that I've done so far, and that hopefully will continue to drive me long into the future.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to know more about your journey, and we'll move on to the next question from here. Dhruv, when did you plan to study abroad, and how did you prepare yourself for each of these places, Harvard, Oxford, and the subsequent scholarships that you received? And what spiked stories allowed you to stand out in each of these competitive environments?
That's a big question, Nirali, and I think I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I think there was just so much in the answer that I had to get started before you could even finish the question. But broadly speaking, I think I have always been a giant nerd. I still remember that I wrote my first short story when I was 6 years old. It was about these giants who wanted to play cricket. And so they created a bat and a ball out of water and then played cricket with each other. And through most of my childhood, I wanted to be a writer. I read a lot and I read widely. But I think what really changed the path of my life was when I started doing competitive debating in the 8th grade. And so I competed with the Indian Schools Debating Society. I was part of the Indian national debating team, and I debated at the World Championships 3 times over the course of high school. Yeah, and I think that genuinely pushed me to think in a much larger way. It pushed me to work harder and be more ambitious. And it was very exciting because for the first time I was engaging with topics that were really so wide-ranging, from economics to political science to history to culture to art, all of these things that I had a very superficial understanding of before. And that made me excited about a lot of different topics, and I didn't really know what I wanted to focus on for undergrad. And that's when I started thinking about applying to the US, because I knew that the liberal arts system would allow me to explore different topics and then figure out what I wanted to major in, as compared to an Indian system where I had to pick what I wanted to study right off the bat. But I still didn't know if it would be possible to apply abroad. Around me, I didn't really know anyone who had gone abroad for undergrad. I knew a lot of people who had finished their undergrad in India and then gone abroad for their master's degrees. I knew we couldn't afford it without financial aid, and I had heard that there were very few places that would give financial aid to undergrads, and that it was incredibly hard to get. I think that changed once again when I competed at the World Championships. I came across a number of people who were competing there who were slightly older than me. And these were all students who were just finishing up their 12th grade from countries from around the world. And they had all, after having finished school in their home countries, were now heading to places like NYU and Penn and Stanford. And that's the first time that I met people like me who had applied to the US for undergrad and gotten in. And that made me realize that it was possible and that I should consider giving it a shot. And so I shortlisted a set of universities. To be honest, it was largely based on which places had need-based financial aid for international students. So for those of you who don't know, a lot of American universities do offer aid for international students, but they take that into account when making admissions decisions. So if you ask for aid, your chances of getting in are lower. But there are a handful of universities like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Amherst, at least when I applied, that didn't take into account whether you were asking for aid or not. And so those were universities that were a really good choice for me if I managed to get in. And then I applied to other top universities because I figured if I did have to spend the money, then it would better be used at a place that was really, really good at what it did as compared to going to a lesser ranked university, in which case I would rather just study in India and then consider going abroad for my master's degrees.
Absolutely.
And so and so based on that, I shortlisted my set of universities and I then started writing my essays and wrote my SATs. And back then we still had the SAT subject tests, which I know have now been scrapped. So I wrote my SAT subject tests in math, English, and which I'd been studying at the time, and took all of them in the regular admission cycle, and then waited with bated breath for the decisions to come in. And the decisions actually came in the day before my commerce, and I knew that the results were going to come out in the middle of my board exams, and I told myself that I wouldn't check the results because I was nervous that if things went well, then I would have no desire to continue studying and I would do my exams badly. And if things went poorly with the admissions, then I would be sad and then I would once again do my exams badly. So I figured I would just hold off until after the exams ended and then check the admissions decisions. But what was annoying was that as the admissions decisions started coming in, one of the universities had put the word congratulations in its title and it popped up on my phone, and I opened it and I looked at it and I realized that I had gotten into Harvard. And so that was the first email I checked, and I was elated to have gotten in. It was followed that day by a string of rejections from a number of other universities, which just goes to show how much of this is down to chance. But I'd gotten in somewhere that I was very, very happy with, and I was excited to go. A few weeks later, we got our financial aid decision, and I had gotten full financial aid based on need, based on my family's financial situation and income and so on. And so that's when it was confirmed that I was going to go, and I let myself get super excited at that point. And yeah, that was how I ended up applying to Harvard. Beyond that, I didn't prepare myself for the program there very much. I wish I had. I feel like if I had done more research, read up more, I would have been better prepared to go into university in terms of knowing what my options are and being able to make the most out of my courses. But I had a great time anyway.
That sounds like an amazing story.
Thank you. So that was my experience of applying to and getting into Harvard. Would you like me to just go on and talk about Oxford as well? Would that make sense?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Perfect. So, I ended up majoring in economics at Harvard. I had a great time. I think we'll delve into a bit more of detail about what I did there in a second. But towards the end of it, I figured that I wanted to, I knew that doing research and doing a PhD was on the cards down the line because of my interest that had been sparked in economics, but I wasn't sure. In fact, I was pretty sure I didn't want to do a PhD right away, right after undergrad. And so I applied to a couple of jobs. I got a job offer at a consulting company called Dalberg that I really liked. But I also figured, why not put in an application for the Rhodes Scholarship, because the deadline was pretty early on. in sort of the summer before my final year. And I thought if I write the essay and put in all of this work, then it'll help me with other applications as well down the line. So for those of you who don't know, the Rhodes Scholarship is one of the oldest scholarships in the world, and 5 people from India get it every year to go to Oxford University. And then there are a number of other people from around the world who get selected as well and join us at Oxford. And so it's quite a competitive scholarship, but it's has been a wonderful experience. And the way that it works, at least for the Indian selection, is that you've got to write an essay, an application essay. You've got to have about 6 recommendation letters from professors or other people in your life. You've got to have a CV, and then you go through 2 stages of interviews. And so I thought putting together this essay, getting the recommendation letters in line would be useful if I wanted to apply to other things that year as well, as my undergrad degree was completing. I didn't expect to get the scholarship. I don't think anyone applying expects to get it, because the odds are naturally always against you, given the numbers of incredibly qualified people who apply. But I gave it a shot. I had my first interview, which was a technical round. At least that's how the Indian system works. And it was on Zoom. I was sitting in Harvard and I was calling them. Might have been Skype back in the day. I don't think Zoom was as popular, but it was a pretty miserable experience for me, honestly. The video stopped working, and so I was just speaking to these disembodied 3 voices asking me questions. And I still remember that after that interview, just half an hour or so, I called up a friend and I told her, I need ice cream. And then she came over with Ben and Jerry's, and we walked by the side of the Charles River at Harvard while I cried about how terrible my interview was. Luckily, the interviewers seemed to disagree with that and offered me a chance to come back to the second round and do the interview there. And so the second round was in person, and I had to fly from Cambridge, Massachusetts, all the way to Delhi to do my my final round interview. The final round interview comprises of a dinner in the evening where all of the interviewers and all of the other applicants who've made it to the stage have dinner together, where you're talking and you're starting to make first impressions. And then an interview the following day where you sit down opposite this table of about 10 interviewers who then ask you questions on whatever they want for the next 20 to 30 minutes. And so that was my interview procedure. And after that, you've got to wait around at the interview location all day while waiting for the other interviews to finish, because the results are announced in person, where they bring all the applicants into a hall and then they say out loud the names of the 5 people who have gotten the scholarship. So that was the experience of, it was nerve-wracking, and
to say the least.
Yeah, and I was very glad I dragged my poor mom to Delhi as well to accompany me, because then I could unload all of my concerns on her. But luckily, it went well once again, and I ended up getting the scholarship. And once I'd gotten the scholarship, I then had to apply to Oxford, and I knew that I wanted to study the MPhil in Development Studies, which was an interdisciplinary master's that combined economics, but also anthropology and history and political science to explore issues that developing countries face. And so that's how I ended up going to Oxford, doing my 2 years in the degree. I really enjoyed the research I was doing and the sort of approach that the department took to developmental issues. And so I decided to stick around for a PhD. And so that's where I currently am. I transitioned from the master's into a PhD, and I'm doing research on entrepreneurship in India.
That's amazing. And that's such a great story. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I'm sure that a lot of people who are watching this can definitely take inspiration from your story, understand the nuances of what it takes to go through a scholarship round, or in your case, multiple scholarship rounds, and as well as, what parts of your application stood out in this entire process. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Moving on to the next question. So, how did you choose your undergraduate and postgraduate major? Because I remember you mentioning in the beginning that you preferred United States for its liberal arts outlook towards things. So, during those 3 years, I assume you must have done a few things that would have allowed you to really figure out what is it that you want to do. Because I have so many people coming to me who are still like, I'm not sure, I like this and I like this as well.
Yeah.
So my question to you would be, how would you recommend prospective students identify their Ikigai? And, what was it during your journey that allowed you to figure out what you're good at, what you like to do, how you want to contribute to the world, and how you also want to earn your living?
Yeah, quickly, it was 4 years in undergrad, thankfully, and that's one of the other benefits of US degrees is that
It's a 4
they're a
years,
little
that's
bit
right.
longer to give us a bit of time to explore. So yeah, I went into undergrad knowing that I wanted to study social issues generally. Debating had made me excited about studying how people interact with each other, the problems that we face as a society. But there are tons of ways to approach this. You can do it from economics, political science, sociology, religion, just a number of different ways of studying social issues. And so that's what I did in my first year. I took a class in political science, I took classes in economics, I took classes in religion, I took classes in sort of a more historical or legal approaches to these issues, and tried to see what clicks. And what I discovered was that, at least at that time, what I enjoyed was the fact that economics used quantitative data-based methods to make decisions, in that you could take quantitative data, run it through statistical analysis, and that would give you a fairly objective view of what the answer in a particular situation is. And I love that approach that it had and the rigor with which it approached problems around the world. And so that's what I stuck with. I ended up going deep into economics research in my undergrad there. I took sort of intensive versions of the micro and macroeconomics courses. I took a lot of statistics and math, and I took courses in economics ranging from development economics to political economics to financial crises and how to deal with them. So really a wide-ranging set of things. And that's how I approached my summer internships as well. So in undergrad, you usually do your internships over the summer, though some people take on some extra work alongside their semesters as well. And the planning for this starts early. So the summer is June through August, but you start thinking about it sort of December of the previous year because you need to put in the applications. And my 3 summers, I had an absolute blast. I spent the first summer in Germany working in a private sector firm just to see what that was like. I loved being in Germany, but I realized that at least at that point, research was more into me than working in a company. I then spent the next 2 summers doing research. So the summer after my second year, I did research at the Harvard Business School with a professor who was a mentor of mine called Tarun Khanna. And the final summer, I worked at the Jamal Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, which is a research organization that uses experiments in economics to answer questions.
Oh,
So that's how I approached it, just in terms of, yeah, so they go out into the real world and experiment using trying to change factors up for one group of people but not another group, and compare the outcomes between the two of them. And so that's the 3 summers that I spent. And as I did more and more of it, I realized that I was passionate about development economics and issues facing developing countries more broadly. And naturally, I had a personal stake in it, having grown up in India and having all of my family here as well. However, the more I dug deep into research in economics, the more I started to feel a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit dissatisfied with it being the exclusive way through which I look at the world. And I think that's because economics can be quite confident in the methods it uses and a little bit dismissive of other fields and the other approaches. And the quantitative way of looking at the world is great, but it doesn't take into account a lot of really important factors that affect how humans behave and interact with each other. So that's why for the master's, I went for a more interdisciplinary approach where I could use qualitative methods, which means interviews, observations, texts, all of that, combining methods from anthropology and other fields to study similar sorts of questions that I was looking at. And so that's what drove me to that particular master's degree in Oxford, because it was quite unique in the blend of disciplines that it used. And that's why I stuck along there for the PhD as well. Along the way, I have taken the time to explore other things using internships and projects. While continuing on with research, I've also worked at Dalberg, a development consulting company, where I spent a summer and had an absolutely great time, where we work with nonprofits, governments, companies on projects that have social impact, and you advise them on how to structure their thinking around particular problems. I've also had the honor and privilege of leading or growing two organizations. So after competing with the Indian debating team as a student, I came back in my final year of undergrad and moving forward as one of the coaches of the national team. And I was also heavily involved with. Thank you. It's been a great experience. The Indian team won the World Championships in 2019, and so that was a real highlight. But it's also been great helping the organization grow into a really nationwide effort to bring debating to schools and students. We've had thousands of students participate in our programs every year and be impacted by them. And so that's one organization that I've been heavily involved with, and I'm continuing to work with going forward. And the other is I've also, with a dear friend of mine from undergrad, set up a social enterprise called Lumiere Education. And so this is an organization that I'm currently heading in and helping run, which brings research opportunities to high school students around the world. And so with both of these, it's been sort of a desire to take all of the incredible opportunities that I've got and bring them to more students, especially young high school students in India and other countries. And that's always been the goal of the work. And I think of it as the other side of my research. So the research is thinking sort of theoretically and academically about problems in developing countries. And these organizations are a way to give back and try and make things a little better and a little more accessible to students.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good blend of both worlds, right? I think it's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that part with us. And I definitely do agree. I think participating in a bunch of opportunities, just exploring options, coming back, spending some time reflecting and seeing what works for you before you really make the big leap. So that when you do, you're definitely a lot more sure about what you're doing, what you want out of the experience. And I think you're more true to yourself and to the environment about what you want to take out of the experience. So thank you for sharing that.
To answer the second part of the question about the Ikigai, the one thing I would say is that there's really no necessity that a person has a single Ikigai through their entire life, especially in the world we live now where people change jobs every couple of years, change careers. I approach these things as when I'm spending my time on doing a particular thing, whether it's an internship over a couple of months or a degree over a couple of years, I really look at what do I hope to learn and get out of this experience and try and match the experiences to what I feel like I need to build up skills and build up myself as a person and enjoy and will I have a good time being in place, being with these people, doing these things and those opportunities or projects or experiences.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a nice way of looking at it, because I think you have to take a step back before you decide to invest so much time, effort, energy, and see what is it that you're expecting from it and whether it's realistic and sensible in the long run.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question. So, I mean, you hear so much about students applying to Harvard and Oxford, but there's also a level of fear that sets in, which is, how will I be able to compete? Am I really as good as everyone around me believes that I am? So maybe, I'm sure you must have felt this too at some point. So what were the strategies that you employed to cope with the rigor and competition at Harvard once you were admitted, and now that you continue employing at Oxford?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a couple of assumptions built into it that I would like to question. The first is with respect to rigor. I absolutely think that these are rigorous academic experiences where the quality of work expected is very high and the standards in terms of what you read and work on are quite high as well. But I actually think the Indian education system prepares students quite well for these experiences, because the Indian education system, it does anything, it teaches you to work really hard. And so the experience I still remember before my CBSE math exam of solving every problem in my textbook at least twice, if not more times, prepares me quite well to put in the hours needed to succeed at a place like Harvard or Oxford. And I found that Indian students end up, in terms of at least the pure academic experience, doing reasonably well. The place where I think the Indian education system doesn't prepare us as well is to think creatively in both the work that we do and the options that we pick. So sort of, it's quite a limited view of the world that we have going in, and we might shut off opportunities thinking, that's not, there's no scope for that, or that's not interesting because I haven't been exposed to it. And so approaching things with an open mind and being creative about how you do things is important. And I also think that the Indian education system maybe doesn't teach us to ask for help when we need it. And so that's the thing with the rigor, is that it's rigorous, but people are always willing to help. So these universities have mental health organizations, and they've got academic counseling organizations, and you've got professors and teaching fellows who will set aside time to work with you. But it's on you to reach out and ask for this help and get this help early. So I think that's been a really important learning for me to do that and not let sort of my pride or fear get in the way of asking for the help that I need to cope with the rigor. With respect to the competition, I don't think that students at these institutions are necessarily overtly competitive, because once you get to an institution like this, you realize that the way that all of you grow is by helping each other out and working with each other rather than against each other. So I found students to be incredibly collaborative, always open to making connections and engaging with you on a personal and professional level, always happy to make use of their networks to say, introduce you to somebody or talk to you about an experience that they had. The competition is sometimes internal rather than external, and there's this thing called the swimming duck phenomenon, which you might have heard of, which is that you look around you at these universities and you feel bad, not that anyone else is doing anything, because you think all of these other students are simultaneously doing better in their classes, doing more extracurricular activities, and having a better social life than me, and I'm not doing that. But what that doesn't reveal is that it's like ducks swimming in a pond, in that they look like they're floating serenely across the surface, but every single one of them is paddling furiously right under the water to try and stay afloat. And realizing that, everybody else is struggling often just as much as you are, is really useful to stop that internal sense of competition and move towards a spirit of collaboration.
I really liked how you answered the question by breaking it up. And you're so right. I think a lot of competition, whether it's at Harvard or Oxford, I think for most of us is internal, and somewhere just taking a step back and realizing we're all essentially doing the same thing. And I'm sure that people watching this will find a lot of confidence in their choices as they decide to even aspire towards the Ivy Leagues, knowing that, they can do it. So thank you for sharing this aspect of things. Moving on to the next question. So can you tell us a little, you spoke a lot about your involvement with the national debating team, and even to the extent that, once you're still at Oxford, now that you're still at Oxford, you're still being associated with it. And now that, you've coached them, they've won. So can you tell me a little bit more about that, and how did it help you both professionally, we can see, but also like personally?
Yeah, I think the biggest way that debating helped me personally is that it forced me to question assumptions that I had about the world and about myself. So it really expands your horizon. So I gave you an example already about how I had assumed that it wasn't possible to apply abroad. I'd assumed that it wasn't possible to get financial aid. But the whole point of debating is challenging those and really breaking them down. And so it forces you to do that internally as well. And I think that's incredibly important. And the other way that it's helped me personally is that it's given me some really, really dear friends, because when you are in the midst of it with with other debaters on your team or other coaches that you're working with, and you're facing the pressure of competition and the pressure of the world championships. The friendships forged out of that fire are some lifelong, truly incredible friendships with people who are passionate and who are hardworking and who have been there for you in a really hard time. And so those are some of the ways in which personally it's been of incredible value to me.
Tell me something, for people, because I do have a few clients who come into me as well, and they're like, we're just really shy and we don't know how to go up on stage. And, I mean, if maybe if it was a written debate, it would be okay. But, because when you're performing and you're around, in such competitive environments and actually arguing with somebody, how would you sort of coach somebody who doesn't have a very aggressive personality style? Analytical, but maybe not a very aggressive to put forth their points. I mean, I do realize you don't have to be the loudest, but at the same time, maybe I think what I'm trying to say is people who are a little underconfident with their ability to summarize their thoughts and articulate them in front of a large group of people. Do you have any advice for them?
I think the unofficial motto of the Indian national debating team is practice, practice, practice.
Correct.
And that's honestly what I think helps the most. So you can begin with practicing in front of a mirror just to yourself, recording yourself and listening to yourself back. It's awful at the beginning when you're hearing yourself speak, but it really can help you discover what you're doing wrong and improve it. And then slowly expand from there. Put your hand up for small scale opportunities, which honestly won't have any impact in the long run, like presenting to a group of friends or in class, and then move on from there to the higher stakes things. A common piece of advice for job interviews, for instance, is try and sign up for more than you think you'll need, because the initial job interviews are often a form of practice for the later ones. And so just taking up all of these opportunities that you get, if you do feel underconfident, to do it, and then realizing that, hey, it isn't that bad and I'm getting better with each one of these opportunities, is probably the best piece of advice I've got to overcome that particular issue.
That is so interesting. And I think you've brought across a really, really important point that, I think so many things can be done well with just a little bit of practice and being kind to yourself in the beginning, saying that, hey, it's okay if I don't do really well, but everyone goes through this curve. and that's completely okay. Also, another quick question. So do you have like a particular age group for the national debating team? And how does one get to participate? Is it like pan-India?
Yeah, it is pan-India. It is for students, currently for students who are sort of 13 years and above, though they are constantly expanding the work that they do, and I'm sure they'll have programs for younger students soon. And you can go on the website and see more. They do a combination of general programming, so sort of camps, content-based classes, things like that, which can help you improve in debating, and also host an incredibly comprehensive selections process for the Indian National Debating Squad. And so that involves multiple rounds of competitions and then a national camp, which happens over the course of 5 days and is such a wonderful experience to meet other students. And at the end of it, the national squad is selected of about 15 students who receive in-depth training from really, really incredible debaters from around the world. And they prepare to represent India at the World Championships as well as other international competitions.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the policies around this debating society. And I'm sure that a lot of people watching this would feel inspired and less intimidated in raising their hand to the smaller opportunities first before they join a society with such huge reach and amazing opportunities that it can provide. Moving on to the next question. So how important was research? I think the other aspect that you really focused about was research that helped you in your journey. So how do you think it helped you academically and professionally? And you are connected with Lumiere Education as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how a platform like Lumiere can help you as an individual really evolve?
Yeah, I think research is one of those things that's totally changed my life because it's forced me to think about the world in a much deeper way. It begins with being curious about the world, looking around you and going, hey, that seems a bit off, or I don't quite understand that. I wonder why that's happening that way. And then it involves really engaging with this incredible store of knowledge that we've created as a society over centuries. So what's called the academic literature, and reading up what have other people said about this so that you can become a smarter and more aware person. And then you can stand on the shoulders of these giants to come up with your own way of looking at the world. And then it involves actually doing your research. So collecting data, analyzing it, trying to understand how this fits in with other things we know, and then writing up your research and trying to disseminate it to other people. And so every step of that process, I think, is important, from the curiosity to the ability to collect and analyze data to make a decision, and the ability to write and present really effectively to convince others. All of those are skills that I've gained from research and that have helped me surely in my academic journey, because I'm now doing a PhD, but also professionally when you approach a job with that same kind of curiosity and willingness to ask questions and willingness to learn. You approach communication with people using some of the skills that you've learned from effectively communicating your ideas in research, all of which is super, super important. In particular, Lumiere Education works with younger students. So we work with high school students and increasingly some college students as well. And the way it operates is that it's a virtual 12-week research program where the students, once you've gone through an application process, are matched with a PhD mentor from some of the world's top universities. So we've got mentors from places including Harvard and Stanford and Oxford and Yale. And all of these PhD mentors are there to work with young students and to mentor them. And that's their passion, and that's why they're there. And over the course of 12 weeks, you explore a subject together. The student writes a 20-page research paper and comes out of it with an experience that has changed both their academic journey in terms of thinking deeper and harder about these issues than probably anyone else in their school or class has, as well as personally having learned how to better manage their time, how to be more confident, to go back to our previous conversation, and a relationship with an incredibly inspiring mentor that can lead into the future. So that's really our goal with Lumiere, is to increase access to mentorship from some of the top mentors in the world and increase access to research opportunities that can change students' lives.
What a wonderful opportunity. I'm truly so glad that Stephen and you are working towards this. And I definitely see this having a lot of scope in the future for so many students who are bright, who are interested, and who are curious. So I think this is something extremely wonderful that you're doing. And I hope that, you know, it continues to grow and flourish with all your efforts and endeavors.
Thank you. And I think this is, it's obviously hugely beneficial to the student and it's beneficial to society, but it also has some external benefits for people as well, in terms of strengthening their applications to places like Harvard and Oxford when they're applying, making their applications to other internships more competitive. So really it helps them move forward and gain access to more opportunities, which I thought was important to mention in line with the rest of our conversation today as well.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you get access to a whole bunch of network that you can leverage upon as you move forward. It can be a very strong indicator for, as you correctly mentioned, the universities that you're applying to, as well as jobs that you're looking at, just indicating, as you said, that, you know, here's an individual who knows how to balance his time, who's really passionate, very detail oriented, and can really think analytically and communicate that effectively. I definitely qualities that everyone's looking for these days.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So moving on to the last question, is there any overall advice you'd like to give in addition to what you've already said for students who are looking to apply at Harvard or Oxford, or even the scholarships that you've had the chance to get access to, in terms of values that they should imbibe within themselves, and also in terms of how they should position and communicate their narrative and stance to the people who are interviewing them?
Yeah, I'll say two things, which might seem a bit contradictory, but I promise aren't. The first is just put in the work. I have students approach me and ask me about how to get into Harvard, but it's pretty clear they haven't even Googled the university and read anything about it before. And so put in the work in terms of understanding the place you're applying to, what they offer, why you want to apply to them, and how to apply to them, but also put in the work in terms of building yourself up to be an all-rounded and interesting person with some sort of real expertise or talent that these universities will look for. However, and this is the second piece of advice, is I wouldn't recommend shaping your life around trying to get into one of these universities. In fact, I think that makes for a pretty miserable experience, given that the selection rates of these universities is so low that you are setting yourself up for disappointment if your life's goal is to get into a Harvard or an Oxford. In contrast, I would say, going back to the things that I mentioned earlier, do the things that you find engaging and interesting, and the ones where you think you'll learn the most, and that'll help you grow both academically, professionally, and as a person. And bet on yourself and think that doing this and doing the work will mean that you will come out of it as an all-rounded and incredible individual. That's how I would approach it. Put in the work, but put in the work towards improving and improving yourself and of general professional and personal success, rather than trying to aim for a single university and making that your goal for years and years of your life.
I think that is such a good advice, because you're so right. I mean, you don't have to set yourself up for failure, but you have to work hard to improve who you are. And if you do get in, that's a great reason to celebrate. But if you don't, you have other options too. Yeah. And on how hard you worked on yourself, those skills will definitely be put to use no matter where you go, and you definitely be able to do something worthwhile with your life. So I definitely agree. That's not contradictory, but it's definitely more holistic. It's looking at the yin and yang side of things. So thank you so much, Dhruva, for sharing this with us. It was such a pleasure having you here today with us. And I'm so glad that you were able to take this time to share your journey and your experiences. And I'm pretty sure that so many people watching this would find a lot of strength, clarity, and just hope looking at this interview. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much, Nirali, for this opportunity. And I really hope that people who've listened have found it interesting, at least, if not useful. And I hope to see loads of you apply to the Lumiere, to the debating team, and certainly to Harvard and Oxford, and see a lot of you succeed and excel at these institutions. Thank you.
Thank you.